What happens when leaders, businesses, and even entire industries fail to adapt to change? They drift. And that drift can be the difference between survival and complete failure. Today, we're diving into a framework called strategic drift. What it is, why it happens, and how it explains the growing gap in some businesses and even in politics, such as Zelensky's war strategy and Trump's foreign policy desires. But most importantly, we'll explain what this means for local businesses like yours, because trust me, it's happening all around us.
This isn't just about politics, it's about business, it's about leadership, and it's about staying relevant. We've seen massive companies, think Blockbuster, Nokia, and Kodak, just to name a few, crumble because they didn't adapt fast enough to change. We've seen local businesses struggle for the same reason too. So today we're going deep into strategic drift and how to avoid it before it's too late.
Welcome to the marketing podcast for local businesses, where we provide local businesses in the UK with practical marketing advice to help them grow. I'm Adam, founder of websitedesigners.london, one of the UK's top 1% online marketing agencies, helping businesses generate tens of millions of pounds.
And I'm Josh, I'm the founder of ImproveMySearchRanking.com, a specialist SEO agency based in South London. We've helped more than 400 businesses generate over £200 million in sales.
Okay, so look, let's set the scene. So what's happening in global politics, and we'll talk about the relevance between local to local businesses as well, with a strategic drift slant. So Zelensky and the Ukraine war. So quick refresher for anyone who isn't deep into politics, and I don't blame you if you aren't, but it's a great example of how we can learn from this for strategic drift and how to avoid it in our business. So the Ukraine has been at war with Russia since 2022. When the war started, Western countries, primarily the US and European nations, supported the Ukraine, sending billions in military aid, financial support and supplies.
Fast forward to today, and that support is starting to wane. The US has domestic political issues, Europe's economy is stretched, and the war has dragged on longer than expected. There's now a growing debate over how long Western nations should keep funding Ukraine.
So Zelensky has a problem. His strategy worked at the start, but the external environment is rapidly changing. If he does not adjust, he will risk losing support and ultimately lose the war and his whole country, because at the moment, currently roughly a third of the country is occupied by Russian forces. So strategic drift is happening in real time.
And bringing this back to business, this is exactly what happened to the likes of Blockbuster, Nokia, and Kodak. These were billion-dollar companies, dominant in their markets, and yet they fell apart because they ignored external changes.
So Blockbuster thought Netflix was a gimmick. Nokia thought the touch screen phones were a fad. Kodak invented the digital camera and then ignored it. This isn't just a political issue, it's a business survival issue.
So what is strategic drift? Strategic drift happens when a business or leader fails to keep up with external changes in the environment. It happens slowly at first, but over time the gap between reality and strategy becomes too big to ignore.
So by the time leaders or businesses realise they need a radical change or a transformational change, it's often too late. And for local businesses, this happens all the time. Think about companies in your area that refuse to adapt to social media, to SEO or e-commerce. Well, where are they now?
Let's break down the 4 stages of strategic drift and what they mean for Zelensky, Trump, big business, and also your local business.
Okay, so strategic drift. It's a business framework. There are 4 stages of strategic drift, and we're going to provide you the political business and local business examples as well. So stage 1, it's called incremental change. Small adjustments, but still on course. So the external environment is evolving slowly, so small adjustments still work. Businesses or leaders acknowledge change, but don't see it as an urgent thing. The performance of the business is stable or growing slightly, reinforcing the belief that things are just fine. So essentially, the strategy is still mostly aligned with external trends. No issues yet.
So one example of this would be Zelensky and Ukraine's early war strategy. So when Russia first invaded in 2020, Zelensky quickly
2022,
sorry,
yeah.
my apologies. Quickly adapted, securing Western military support, launching a strong PR campaign and boosting national morale. At this stage, small adjustments were effective, and Ukraine's strategy matched the external environment.
Back to business. In the early 2000s, Blockbuster was still profitable and growing. Recognizing some shifts in consumer behavior, they introduced the DVD from the VHS, removed the late fees and small incremental changes. However, Blockbuster didn't take Netflix seriously, thinking their DVD by mail model was a niche.
And then a local business example, we've got a small coffee shop ignoring mobile ordering or online ordering. So a small independent coffee shop updates its menu seasonally, assumes that loyal customers will always return, and doesn't invest in digital ordering. This seems fine, as foot traffic remains steady for now.
And on that mobile ordering, I know there are plenty of coffee shops that don't do online ordering, but think about being able to agreeing to go on the likes of delivery platforms like Just Eat or Google Just Eat or Deliveroo. If you don't go on those, that could affect your business as well. So the risks. Leaders assume their strategy isn't working and don't feel the urgency to make major changes. The false sense of security leads directly into the second stage, where drift actually begins.
So yeah, stage 2 is strategic drift begins. This is where you can start falling behind without realizing it, essentially. So the key features to this stage is the external environment changes faster than the business or the leader adjusts. What used to work isn't as effective as it used to be, but it's still not a full-blown crisis. Customers, allies, or key supporters start shifting their attention elsewhere. And finally, leadership downplays early warning signs, assuming things will return to normal.
Let's now use an example, a political one. Zelensky's and Ukraine's struggle for ongoing support. So initially, Western nations were united behind Ukraine, but now support is declining due to economic strains, shifting priorities domestically. Zelensky continues using the same appeals for weapons and financial aid, even though the US and EU leaders are now a little hesitant, more the US than the EU. So if Ukraine doesn't adjust to these political shifts, they risk losing crucial support.
So back to business and back to Blockbuster versus Netflix. So by 2005, Netflix has started moving towards streaming, but Blockbuster still believed the physical rental model was the best route for their business success. Blockbuster dismissed Netflix as a niche service, and I believe also had the chance to buy them and said they're too expensive for $1 million. But yeah, instead of Blockbuster dismissed Netflix as a niche service instead of recognizing consumer behavior was shifting towards digital, and early warning signs were ignored. Customer preferences were starting to change with the rise of online usage, and Blockbuster assumed they would come back to their physical stores.
And bringing this back to local businesses like yours, so this is traditional retailers ignoring e-commerce growth. So some independent retailers see a drop in foot traffic, but they assume it's seasonal or temporary, or maybe it's a fad. So instead of investing in an e-commerce store, think if you sell clothes, it's a little clothes store, boutique clothes store. Instead of using an e-commerce store to go online or social media marketing or online promotions, they double down on in-store events. Meanwhile, customers start shopping more online, causing a slow but steady decline in sales.
So the risks here are that leaders assume customers will eventually return instead of adapting to the change. They downplay competitor successes as a temporary trend, and this leads directly into stage 3, which is flux, where the problem becomes obvious and harder to fix.
So stage 3 or 4. Stage 3 is all about flux. This is crisis mode and there's no clear direction. So there's a gap between strategy and reality, and it's now too big to ignore. Performance declines more sharply and leadership scramble for solutions. Internal confusion, disagreement on what to do next. Some attempts at change might happen, but because they lack clear strategy, nothing happens.
So an example here would be Zelensky and Ukraine's uncertain future. If Western support continues to decline, Ukraine faces a serious crisis. They can't sustain the war effort indefinitely, especially not on their own. Zelensky may need a radical shift, such as forming new alliances with India, Japan, or Middle Eastern countries. If he fails to pivot in time, Ukraine risks losing its international credibility and military backing.
And on that, the radical shift might not involve those new alliances, but they might involve him giving up some land something he refused to do early on. They might involve him signing a peace deal with Russia, something he refused to do. And those are radical shifts for Zelensky. So again, those new alliances might not be an option, could be an option, but in reality, should he be signing in order to radically shift his views? Going back to the business example, Blockbuster v Netflix, this is where panic mode starts to begin. By 2010, Netflix was dominating streaming. Blockbuster finally realised the threat, launched an online rental service, but it was little too late. Netflix had already taken the market. Internal chaos ensued, leadership debating different strategies, but they lacked a unified vision.
Local business example would be restaurants struggling post-COVID without digital adaptation. So many restaurants ignored online ordering and delivery services before the pandemic. When lockdowns hit, those that had online systems in place already survived and probably thrived, where those who didn't had to rush to sort out their digital ordering and probably missed out on a lot of business, or potentially could have closed down if they never adapted to the change.
Yeah. So look, what's the risk? Well, if leaders don't act quickly, they will move into stage 4, something called transformational change or failure, also known as demise. Competitors and external forces are now making decisions for them. They can go one of two ways.
So stage 4, which is the final stage, is the transformational change or failure or demise, as Adam said. So the key features to this are the organisation must radically change or face collapse. Leadership shake-ups often happen at this stage. The company or leader either reinvents themselves successfully or becomes irrelevant.
A political example here, back to Zelensky in Ukraine, make or break moment. If Ukraine loses Western backing, Zelensky's only option will be to build new alliances, change its military strategy, consider negotiations, different tactics, find new global partners outside NATO if NATO don't agree for them to join, which I believe Trump is currently saying they're refusing to do so. So if he does not take that bold action, Ukraine will risk losing the war and international credibility, but also the whole of Ukraine potentially.
Back to Netflix versus Blockbuster. So Netflix successfully pivoted into streaming and eventually content production. Think House of Cards, Stranger Things, and the other kind of TV shows that they have themselves created. Blockbuster completely failed to adapt, went bankrupt, and now has one remaining store, I believe. I think it's somewhere in America.
So now let's bring it back to local businesses like yours. So if we compare the high street retailers that survived versus those that didn't. So I think John Lewis and Marks and Spencer's invested early in e-commerce. They adapted their business model. Marks and Spencer, for example, thrived with food deliveries, and now they're doing really good with their clothes. Debenhams and Toys R Us resisted change, relied on in-store shopping, and disappeared from the market.
So the risk is here, if no transformation happens, failure becomes inevitable.
And this transformation needs to be extremely bold. It needs to be transformational change. It can't just be incremental change. Otherwise, you're going to lose money, you won't be able to keep supporting the losses, and you will just go into failure. Same goes for that political example we gave. So, conclusion. The key to staying ahead and what local businesses must do now. So, we've broken down strategic drift. We've looked at how it applies to global leaders like Zelensky and Trump, and even connected it to major business failures like Blockbuster. But the real question is, what does it mean for you as a local business owner?
Here's the brutal truth. Most businesses don't realise they're drifting until it's too late. They're sitting in stage 1 or 2, feeling comfortable, making small tweaks, but completely unaware that their market, their customers and their competitors are evolving faster than they are.
So they tend to realise in stage 3 the flux, the panicking, scrambling for solutions, watching the revenue drop, not sure what to do about it. If they don't act fast, stage 4 will hit and they'll either shut down or transform. So that's what we want to help you avoid. We're going to give you 3 quick tips on how to help you avoid that.
Yes, so the first step is recognising the warning signs. So first of all, let's be practical. How do you know if your business is in strategic drift? Here are the red flags for you to watch out for.
So if you're relying on old marketing methods that no longer work, so think word of mouth, flyers, newspaper ads, magazine ads to bring in those leads, but now they don't work, that should be a warning sign. If your competitors are ranking higher on Google, running Facebook ads, Meta ads, leveraging TikTok, and you're not, you'll be falling behind.
So customers are going to competitors who have evolved. If you hear things like, I didn't even know you existed, or I went with your competitor because they were easier to find online, you're probably in stage 2 or 3 of drift. This is exactly what happened to Kodak and to Nokia. Customers didn't stop buying cameras or phones, they just went somewhere else instead.
And likewise with Blockbuster. So look, if your revenue is plateauing or declining, but you don't know why, well, the biggest business in history didn't collapse overnight. They gradually lost relevance. So if you're seeing lower sales, fewer inquiries and less foot traffic, you might need to rethink your strategy ASAP.
So second idea, or the second step, is to adapt before it's too late. So let's say you recognise the initial signs. So what do you actually do about it? How do you make sure your business doesn't drift into irrelevance?
So you need to really commit to that transformation. If you're not online, you probably don't exist. Okay? Invest in a professional website. Invest in SEO. Of course, Josh and I can help you with those two things, but we're not the only SEO and web designers and marketing agencies online. There are plenty more. Use Google Ads, social media, email marketing, etc. Even small local businesses need a Google business profile and to be optimized. Otherwise, again, you'll be invisible.
Next is to actively monitor your industry and competitors. So take a look at what your biggest competitors are doing. Are they running Google Ads? Are they on Instagram? Are they on TikTok? Are they offering mobile ordering? Do a deep dive. Review each of your big competitors, see what they're doing, and see what you can learn from them. If they're steps ahead of you, you're already drifting behind.
And one thing I just want to point out here, Josh, I love the way you talk about reverse engineering when we talk to prospective clients. You talk about how, in order to get them their best SEO, you look at competitors who are ranked number 1 on Google, look at what they're doing, and try and replicate them, but even better.
Exactly.
So next one is to be willing to experiment and pivot. It might be a bit daunting, but businesses that survive don't just wait for change, they embrace it. If you want to be super successful, you do something that other people aren't. Example, local gyms that offered virtual workouts during the pandemic kept their members, while those that didn't struggled to recover. Or retailers who jumped into e-commerce early, i.e. selling online, are still thriving today, while others close their doors.
So finally, the third idea here is to future-proof your business. Strategic drift doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow decline that happens when businesses and business owners get too comfortable. So how do you make sure you never drift again?
Well, you have to have that growth mindset, right? Business that thrive and always learning and always improving, then you have that growth mindset. The moment you think, oh, I don't need to change, it's just temporary, that's probably the moment you're going to start falling behind.
Secondly, you want to regularly review and update your strategy. So set a quarterly strategy check-in. Maybe take a day off every 3 months to see what's working, what's not working, what's changing in your industry. Looking into things, reviewing your competitors as well. If something isn't working, don't wait years and years to fix it. Adjust things now so you'll go on the right path.
And invest in future trends before they become standard. So think AI-powered chatbots, automation, or social media trends. Test them early. The first business to embrace that innovation always wins. Think again, TikTok.
Yeah, cool. Or look at Amazon. While traditional retailers were debating whether e-commerce would last, Amazon was investing billions in warehouses, logistics, and AI. And today they dominate global retail.
Absolutely. So that's why companies like Netflix survived as well, and Blockbuster didn't. It's why Apple thrives, Nokia collapsed. The ones who see the change coming or act before it's urgent are the ones who win and win big.
So in the final thoughts, the choice is yours. Whether you're Zelensky, Trump, Blockbuster, Kodak, or a small bakery in your local town, the same rule applies. Adapt early or you'll be forced to change when it's too late.
Strategic drift is super dangerous because it's invisible at first, but the good news, you are in control whether you adapt or fade away.
So ask yourself, are you evolving ahead of the curve or are you slowly drifting? And if it's the latter, what's your next move?
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast and this episode. If this episode resonated with you, please do hit the follow button, the subscribe button, leave us a good review. Let us know what's an example of strategic drift that you've seen in your industry as well in one of the Q&A topics, or drop us an email. Thanks for listening. My name's Adam.
And I'm Josh.